That's one of the things that National Canadian Film Day was designed to do, to encourage people to come together. And how can we get you together? Come together to listen to a Canadian story. Is it your story? Well, maybe it is. Maybe it's your neighbor's story. But it doesn't matter. It's our story. You'll like it, and you'll share it with us, and we'll rub elbows, and we'll laugh and cry together.
Welcome to Face, a place for stories that shape us. My name is David Peck. Well, welcome back to Face. It's always such a pleasure to have conversations that matter. And, you know, I think actually all conversations matter on some level. And isn't that kind of a beautiful thing to step into a new relationship? And I'm about to do that here today with our guest, a very special guest, a critically acclaimed actor, a face that you will recognize and a name you will as well. Colm Feore here is with us on Face to talk about a whole lot of things, but we're going to actually step into this thing called National Canadian Film Day, which is April 15th, coming up like a freight train. It's around the corner. Colm, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I would imagine you're having quite a few conversations around this thing called National Film Day. We've got 2,000 free screenings. What is it, in 49 countries around the world? I mean, I've just been doing a little bit of a deeper dive on a couple of press releases. You'll appreciate this. I was reading a press release and I thought, okay, hang on, that date doesn't seem. I was reading an old press release. So, you know, it's you got to catch up. You got to stay focused. Colm. Tell what's on your mind as we get closer to National Film Day.
Well, we're everywhere. We want to be everywhere. We want to get, as far around the world as we can. Obviously, we're blanketing the country, but we do have screenings in all kinds of places around the world, and obviously military bases, anywhere a Canadian is, working or is stuck doing something, we have an opportunity to say, hey, why don't you watch Canadian film today and celebrate with us? And it's just a marvelous opportunity to share something that we happen to be good at. That's making movies, and making movies that are particular to who we are. So it's not just about making movies. It's not just about blockbusters and that kind of action adventure stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I think they're great. But we tend to be better at insightful, intelligent, carefully conceived, thoughtful storytelling type of movies. And when people see them, they respond remarkably enthusiastically, which is, obviously gratifying. But the bottom line is we looked at National Canadian Film Day as an opportunity to focus on that, to draw attention to that, and to say, hey, listen, while you were not paying attention, this is what we do, and this is how we do it.
I love that was that a little Hollywood diss there, Colm? Intelligent, insightful, thought. I mean, I love that. Go there, because I agree with you.
Don't get me wrong. I am very happy to have participated in some very brilliant Hollywood stuff that I'm enormously proud of. And I've worked for some of the best directors ever and on some of the coolest films ever. And so, I get what that does, be it Michael Mann, Sidney Lumet, Clint Eastwood, John Woo. It doesn't matter. They're all amazing. The question, however, is it's so overwhelming. It's so about a tidal wave across the globe of making money and doing all this kind of stuff to get everybody's attention. Sometimes you just want to say, hey, over here, there's just a couple of us. We'd like to tell you a story about your great-great-grandfather who came to this country and and did this, and that's why we now have that. And it may not seem as overpowering as it finally is when you see it, but, if you've seen Fast Runner, you think, what? Right? Grizzlies, any of these films that just tell our story, John and the Missus, you name it, Red Violin. These things were made for a song, and they are made for a song by very, very skilled people who learned their craft at places like the CBC, the National Film Board, right? That's where we all learned to do this stuff, which is why when the American companies come to Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver to make their big films, they find the best people in the world, cameramen, crew members, costumers, actors, etc. And so you say, okay, well, what are we doing for ourselves? this is something we can do for ourselves.
Do you find so? I mean, I think you've really, I had a couple questions sort of prepared in the sense of just talking about that unique kind of angle, towards the way we approach narrative as Canadians. Is it something that you'd like to say? I mean, and this is part of what National Film Day is about. It's about saying, "Hey, come on over here and have a look and step in and." I didn't realize that was a Canadian production and so on. Do you think we have, before we hit record, we were commiserating on the snowfall that was a little too late in the season. Is there something about being Canadian, do you think, that affects the way we tell stories? I mean, I go to Richard Wagamese, for instance, stories are meant to heal. It's one of my favorite phrases, call it, and you've walked many stages, Stratford. You've been in so many films and TV series. You've told so many stories. Is there something, edgy, distinctive about how we step into this
You
art form?
know, I think there is, and I'm very, very fortunate to have been a part of one that has recently got an enormous amount of attention. A small animated short film from the National Film Board called The Girl Who Cried Pearls, which
So good.
just won an Oscar, nominated for Canadian Screen Award. Hopefully it wins. I mean, after the Oscar.
You would think so. You gotta hope. You
No,
gotta
but you
hope.
know what? It's Canada. They might decide just no, they're fine. They've got the Oscar.
The Oscar. Yeah, they're gonna be okay.
The tall poppy syndrome. The fact of the matter is, this is a film, a 17-minute film, stop motion animation. It's got a little bit of CGI. It took 5 years to develop the story, to animate the thing. And at the end of the 5 years, they called me and said, "Would you do the voice in English?" So that's an extraordinary amount of work to tell a story set in Montreal that is so beautifully, absolutely Montreal, and about someone trying to succeed against all odds, out of poverty, against all manner of obstacles. And I can't tell you how much fun and how gratifying it was just to work on it, just to be part of building it, to be there and say to these guys, "Hey, you've had voices in your head for 5 years. What do you want those voices to sound like? Because I'm
Mm,
pretty sure I can do that. I can deliver that for you because of all of the rest of my experience, right?" So I'm using everything I've ever done to bring that to bear on their story. And so, you think that's a great day's work. That's all it was, is a day's work. So you're not going to get rich doing this. You're not going to, retire by any stretch doing it. But are you going to feel fulfilled and that you're participating and that you've helped out something exceptional and imaginative and brilliantly executed? Oh my gosh. Yes. And need I say, available for free at the National Film Board's website, A Girl Who Cried Pearls, which now says Oscar-winning animated film.
very, very nice. And soon to be, hopefully, Canadian Screen Award winning as well. Let's not jinx that, shall we?
Fingers
Yeah, there
crossed.
you go.
I'm knocking wood. But
Yeah.
to be part of something like that and know that it didn't cost millions of dollars. It cost time and effort and brilliance and intelligence and imagination and all of those kinds of things, and a vast crew of people at the NFB willing to spend those many, many years to do that work. And you say, well, for what? Well, it's this story about a guy from Montreal. Is it worth it? No question.
Yeah, it's so good. I had the privilege to interview Adam Baldwin, singer-songwriter, yesterday with Andy Hines in their new film Little Lorraine.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, and it's got a small release in Cape Breton coming up, I think, next week, which is, pretty good timing for them. And I have to say, Colm, as I was watching the film, I had this moment, and I remember it with a couple of Adam McGoyan films, probably Sweet Hereafter back in the day. And, the Canadian money comes out, the Canadian $100 bills from the 80s. And is it crazy for me to say out loud that I actually feel kind of proud about that? Is that all right to say that out loud?
Well, no, but the beauty of it is, as Canadians, we know what they're handling. We know what the denomination is because of the color,
There
right?
you go.
My daughter finds something orange in her purse that wasn't there when she hung it up on the back door. She goes, "Oh my God, $50. Dad's been at my purse again." Right. And I think that's cool. I think that's also a piece of history. I think it's something unique about the way we look at things, right? So our mint decided to print money in this way, right? That says something about us. We like a bit of creativity. We like a bit of color. It's a loony, you make fun of us. Well, then we're going to get a toonie. And,
Well, there was something, I mean, obviously it's very distinctive as you just pointed out, but I couldn't help but smile.
you know,
Obviously the film's set in Cape Breton, for crying out loud. So we know it's Canada, or well, actually maybe we don't know it's Canada, right? Some people would say, well, maybe this is in Europe or wherever, those accents, etc. So I think it's a nice little shout out for a lot of reasons. You use the word participating, Colm. I love that. This idea of participation for me, I've been watching a lot of film, interviewing a lot of filmmakers and directors and philosophers and entertainers over the past 12, 13 years. And there's something about that. I'd love to chat with you about that. Do you feel that more? Acting in a film? Do you feel it more on a stage in a live presentation? This notion of, I don't know, to me, you're kind of building community, if that's fair.
no question. Absolutely no question. I'm very, very lucky. I've been very, very fortunate in that my career has touched on all of it. So I do stage, I do cinema, I do television, radio, commercial, whatever I can do to make a living. I have children who still depend on me. But what I learn from each of those is something slightly different. So the building of community happens more in the theater because I am in control of the event. So if I'm playing Richard III and you sit in the front row of that audience, I'm talking to you and everybody else around you, be that 600 people, 2,000 people, whatever it is. And that event will never happen again in the same
In the same way.
come back to play this again at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon or 8 o'clock tomorrow night. We will never have the same experience. What I try to do in television and film is ensure that I've covered every base possible imaginatively to bring something to life that will do something similar across a screen, either in a cinema or at your home over a TV, right? That I'm trying to be as available and raw and intelligent and everything that I had hoped to express about the story, the character, etc., in the same way. Whereas on stage, I'm doing it live and I am very flexible on a stage. I will respond to a cough. Somebody laughs, whatever it is, I will go, what? What's that? You do something different? Then I'm going to do something different. In the cinema, I will be aware of the crew, certainly of my colleagues and fellow players, but mostly I'll be relying on the director to have a kind of overarching view of what we're trying to achieve on that particular day with that particular scene.
What's beautiful, I think, too, about National Film Day is that there are events happening across the country, and there are going to be these live events. I know Christopher Nolan, big on getting people out to see films in theaters. Things have changed since COVID, of course. I love the cinema experience. Are you kind of a back row kind of guy? Are you a midway down? Where's your
Kind of a
favorite seat?
midway down. I like to be about midway. I like the idea of being overwhelmed or just the tsunami of the visuals works for me. So I do like that. I'm a kind of camera guy too, so framing and composition really appeals to me. So yeah, I'm probably about midway down. On the other hand, I'm totally cool with watching somewhere else on a different platform. Even those I didn't even expect. I used to joke, no one is ever going to be watching Chinatown on their telephone. And now I sit on a plane and I watch somebody watch Chinatown on their telephone.
Right.
It's a big telephone, don't get me wrong, but I was staggered by that. And then I realized as long as you are okay with, the size of the thing, it doesn't really much matter where you're getting the story from. Plugged in, you're listening, you're engaged, you're focused. And all of those things are what we wish for as creators and entertainers, right? That's all we want. And so I can't be prejudiced about where and how, what platform people use. I myself will be on National Canadian Film Day in a movie theater watching The Girl Who Cried Pearls because I think that'd be really cool. But generally speaking, I am not prejudiced anymore. I'm trying to remain open.
There is something kind of fun though too about that community experience, right? In the
Mhm.
theater, even though I'm not going to turn to the people next to me or in front of me. In fact, they might irritate me because they're going to be on their phones. But there's something kind of
But I was talking about the theater. So the community we create in the theater, I look for in the cinema, right? If I'm in a cinema, I will laugh more if everybody else is enjoying it.
it's a great point.
Will be chuckling along with them because we are jiggling that row together. So that community
Nice.
instantly made. And these communities are made in about the first 60 seconds of a theater show, first minute and a half, probably about the same in a movie where we all go, oh, we're going this way or we're going that way. And you can kind of tell. And sometimes, you get stuck with a lousy audience and they're not in a good mood and they don't, they just got off work and they just and they're not serving drinks in the theater or whatever it is, it's a problem. And that can be an issue because it changes the dynamic.
Of course.
There's no question. It's like church. You get a bunch of people in a room together, they share. We just biologically do that. And we like doing that. And that's one of the things that National Canadian Film Day was designed to do, to encourage people to come together. And how can we get you together? Come together to listen to a Canadian story. Is it your story? Well, maybe it is. Maybe it's your neighbor's story. But it doesn't matter. It's our story. You'll like it, and you'll share it with us, and we'll rub elbows, and we'll laugh and cry together. And that does humanity no end of good.
Yeah, that's good. I don't love the word responsibility anymore, but I'm going to use it anyhow. Do you think we, and maybe you as an artist, have, I don't, as a Canadian artist, do you have a responsibility in some respect to help me understand my Canadianness anymore? I mean, isn't that what a National Film Day is about, right? It's about
Yeah,
saying,
no,
take a day aside, set this day aside and learn something else about not only someone else, but also about your own culture. Is
I think that's a huge part of it. And I think what we're trying to encourage people to do is say, okay, listen, you can watch any Marvel movie, Mission Impossible, they're all going to be great. They're going to be fun, they'll be distracting. But on this one day, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? And just gently lead people down a path to a greater understanding of what we are capable of and what we've already achieved, right? Because we've got extraordinary movies from extraordinary internationally recognized filmmakers. I mean, there's no question about that. We just need to focus more attention because let's face it, part of the problem is that movies are expensive. Getting them into theaters is expensive. You can't run them forever, right? So by the time the Canadian movie is in there on the weekend, 2 days later, they have to take it out so they can put, Thor 16 in there because that's the only way the poor guy's going to make any money. And I totally get that. And I completely and fully accept that that's how the business works. So the likelihood of us getting a few million Canadians out to a cinema on National Canadian Film Day is slight. We're going to get some out. Some are really committed and they're going to go. But because we've actually got the cooperation of broadcasters, distributors, platforms, etc., we can get it out to more Canadians more easily, and we can facilitate sending those stories out to more people in a way that was never, dreamt of 10, 15 years ago. Consequentially, we get to tell them and focus them on some of our stories that they would never have paid attention to, even though, keep in mind, their taxpayer dollars have paid to make, right? Because it's telefilm, it's heritage, it's all, most people are applying for grants to make movies for pennies, and those movies are brilliant. But how do you get them in front of people? Well,
how do you get the bums in the seats? It's tough, right? It's really tough.
how do you, not so much bums in seats, because that's a tricky thing. And it's not just popcorn and a great Diet Coke, but how do we get the eyeballs? Get them to look at it on their iPad, on their computer, on their home TV, network, streaming, whatever. And so what we've tried to do is make it as multivariate available as possible. You can go into any venue in Canada, a library, an old folks' home, a movie theater, your TV screen, your computer, and you'll see a great Canadian film. The one of your choice or the one that happens to be playing the place you showed up. So I think that is a huge benefit and bonus to what's happening for us now. And I'm very hopeful that it will return on our investment by having more people just check a box and say, yeah, I'd like to see that Canadian film. I'm going to watch that thing on CBC or Crave or wherever I can find it. And what is that? I'm curious about that. Is Graham Greene in that? I know Graham Greene. He's cool. Let me see that. Right. And so just by flickering attention at something that may or may not, interest them, we might get more and more eyeballs on the stuff we're trying to focus on.
So good. Yeah. Canfilmday.ca is the website for, we'll talk about that a little bit more. We got a few more minutes with you, Colm, if that works for you. I'd love to. One of my favorite Canadian films of all time is Don McKellar's Last Night. I don't know if you remember that or not, but it's got to
Mhm.
be 27 years old,
No,
something like that.
11 years old.
I think it was filmed in. And I
That's a
had the opportunity to
pretty
interview him
different.
at a TIFF a few years back, and it was wonderful to be able to say to him, Don, it's one of the most sublime endings of all time. Anyway, delightful film. So, as you've already pointed out, so many great Canadian films out there going to be highlighted on National Film Day. Check out the website for it. So what's one that's I don't know, what's one Canadian film, Colin, that turned your world upside down?
One of the first that I really was moved by is Mon Oncle Antoine from Claude Jutras. And I suppose looking back at it, first of all, because I'm, an Irish immigrant to this country, and it was all French and kind of cool. My parents were into that, and they sent us to French schools and whatnot. But it was, I think, retrospectively, what I really appreciated about it was that it's pretty European. And when I say European, I don't mean to say that just there were naked women in it, which there were, but semi-naked, which is always good in a European film, but that there was a subtlety to it. There
Mm.
was a kind of discretion and, hey, this is our world. This is what it looks like. This is, you know, deal with it. And of course, it's snowy for most of it, which made it vintage Canadian. And so, I don't know why I was moved by it, but it was, I think the protagonist, the young boy who was learning about and just
Hmm.
what's going on here? And I must have felt something about it like that at the time. And I found that very moving. But, since there have been dozens of others that have moved me and are, or that I've been part of, I've thought these can stand the test of time. These will be a laugh. Or, Canadians should see these, that they will say something to Canadians that Canadians need to hear, right? You look at something like Barney's version, and it stars an American, and it's brilliant because he's a brilliant actor. But it's also something that we recognize. Oh yeah, that's Montreal. Yeah, I know those places. I know those people. Those are my places, my people. And I think it doesn't hurt to have a single day in the year to celebrate or draw attention to some of those things. Just to get people excited about it, say, hey, you don't have to watch the whole thing. Watch 20 minutes of this. Watch 30.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's cool. I think it's relevant. I think it's important. What are you going to be doing on the day? I mean, obviously, you're going to Bon Cop, Bad Cop is going to be
Oh,
played.
Inside Cop is 20 years old.
Wow, 20
It's
years.
20 years old
Well,
this
that's
season.
just crazy talk.
It is absolutely beyond the pale. And I was on a plane, for Canada plane recently. It's still playing.
That's
It's
fantastic.
still on the
Well,
plane.
and so it should be. It's a great film. It's a fun
And,
film.
and it speaks to everybody who's ever worked for Air Canada who had to speak French and English at the same time and, deal with all that. So, yeah, it's very gratifying to see that happen. Bon Cop, Bad Cop, and Landman on the same flight.
That's pretty super cool, man. That
That's
just
good
shows you
news.
there's the pendulum of your career.
Well, indeed, that's true too. But with Bone Cop, that is a movie that has really stood up and is so quintessentially Canadian. Patrick Huard, who wrote it with Kevin Tierney, said it was just a great idea laying on the floor that no one else had picked up. And he said, I'm happy to take advantage of it. But the fact is that it addressed so many issues that every Canadian since Trudeau has had to deal with. That is to say, you got to learn French. If you're working for the government, your French has got to be good. If you're working for the airlines, especially if you're the president, your French has got to be better. And so everybody thought, oh my God, this is my life. Oh, it's so hard. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. So consequently, it's still funny because we still live in this country and those rules still exist. And my character, Martin Ward, is essentially a Francophile innocent. There's so much about Quebec culture he doesn't understand, but he wants to. And that
That's
attitude,
funny.
that attitude, I think, is what makes it funny.
Of
Little
course.
Québécois looks at him and goes, "Are those Jacques Brel records in your? Is that Edith Piaf? Charles Aznavour? Dude, that's not quite how we roll."
But at least you're trying.
At least you're trying. And then he goes, "Oh, what do I need? Carquoise, Daniel Lanois. Where should I go?
Yeah.
Help me understand." But it's the willingness to try. And I do think that that actually had an impact. I think that my willingness, and that's actually my personal willingness, because my Irish immigrant parents sent us to French schools when we were young, and that helped enormously. I forgot it all and then had to relearn it to play things like Trudeau and Martin Ward. But the bottom line was there's an appreciation for it. There was a respect for it.
Mm.
So the moment I go into a shop in Quebec, I speak French, even if badly, right? I start with French, and they can correct me if they like. I don't care. But out of respect for them, in this country, I speak French. Why do I do that? Well, because my parents thought it was a good idea. They taught me, and the National Canadian Film Day showed me movies that made it look like a good idea. So that's what I do. And I don't think it's ever ended badly, and you always learn something. But the
Good.
fact that the film still has legs 20 years on is remarkable, and a remarkable testament to what the country needs.
Really, it's really good. And I mean, we're going to have to wrap here in a minute, but there's something about your character, I think, in that film and what you were talking about that's deeply authentic. So at least you're trying. You're
Well,
right. You're stepping in. You might not be getting it all right, but and I think there's an authenticity to Canadian film, I think, that you might not get elsewhere.
well, listen, if you see Bon Cop, Bad Cop 2, you'll see how much my French has improved in the 10 years between the two films. Because I make mistakes in the first film that Kevin Tierney and Patrick Huard refused to cut because they chose to embarrass me. And they
Mm.
said, "No, it's too funny. The way you do this line, when we kind of know you don't really know what you're saying." Even though I should have known, but there's so many other things happening when you're acting, right? First of all, you're acting, you're dressed up, you're pretending, you're doing all kinds of other things. And so when a familiar word comes across, you just treat it like a familiar word and don't quite get the point. And so I'll explain this joke. Because Patrick hates me, he made me wear a turtleneck, un bon col roulé. And I had the col roulé, which was embarrassing and not stylish at all, wearing like a jacket and this stupid turtleneck. And I was thinking I was the bee's knees. And I'm interviewing some guy in a bar, and he says to me, "Beau col roulé, mon père." Mon père, my father. Now, I'm in my Anglophone mode. All I hear is my father. What he's actually called me is a priest, mon père, because Quebec is lousy with priests and churches. So, mon père, I registered none of this, right? Which, if you were watching it, is hilarious. And so when we cut, these two were collapsed. Tierney and Huard collapsed. And Eric Canwell, God rest him, collapsed. "Guys, no, I know mon père, that's father. It's a priest. I should have known. Let's reshoot this. It was take two, please." He said, and they all went, "No,
No,
no,
that's staying in.
no, that's in the movie. That's in the movie." I said, "God,
Happy accidents. I love
yeah.
it. Have
Oh,
you worn a turtleneck since, Colm?
oh my God, no." I wouldn't. I a skin crawlingly horrible aversion to all of that. But I
Hysterical.
got the joke, and I do recognize that to a certain extent, because I occasionally called myself l'agneau sacrificiel for Anglo-Canadians. I'm a sacrificial lamb for Anglo-Canadians who think they may like to learn French, right? If I can do it, anybody can do it. Trudeau brought it in. I've played Trudeau. I should be able to do it. And so the idea is I'm going to make horrible mistakes, but that's okay. Make the mistakes. I'm too old to care. But what's more important is that I'm willing to try, and that I think bringing the country together with these cultural ideas and stories is so worthwhile that we have to keep doing it. And people like me have to keep sacrificing themselves on the altar of ultimate humiliation to make it work.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you in a turtleneck again, Colin. I
Oh,
think that's a new goal. I think
no,
we may have to speak to the organizers of National Film Day. It's canfilmday.ca. It's April 15th. It's coming like a freight train. Join the party. Check out the website. You can attend an event. You can attend the film. There's Q&As. There's a whole lot going on. Way more going on than meets the eye. There's the tagline for Canadian film. Way more going on than meets the eye. Colm, what a pleasure chatting with you today. I wish we had another, I don't know, 2 to 3 hours. But it's been so great having you on the show, and all the best. Wishing you well with your career, and looking forward to seeing you back up on the stage or on screen soon. And thanks for hanging out with me today on Face to Face.
thank you so much. The pleasure's all mine.
Well, there you have it. That was Colm Feore here on Face to Face, and we had another terrific conversation. I just so love having these unfinished conversations where you're eager to start part two. And isn't that the beauty of stepping into any kind of a relationship, but a new one in particular, chatting about, I think things that matter. And it's always important that I have you along for the ride as well. And you've been listening here to Face to Face, facetofacelive.ca and davidpecklive.com for more information about what I do as well. But before I go there and wrap, Canadian Film Day was really the focus of this interview, but we talked about so much more than that. And if you want to find out more about Film Day, it's canfilmday.ca. The tagline for this year is Let's Dream Together, April 15th. You can find out more on the website. You can attend an event. You can attend a special screening or a Q&A. There's a lot going on locally and nationally. In fact, there's things happening all over the world. There's some very cool special guests, and check out their list. I think they're focusing on about 60 different films. That's canfilmday.ca. But Colm and I talked about so many things about the uniqueness of Canadian storytelling. We talked about participation and about the importance of it, and about the power of community and what storytelling really is all about. And Colm has such an incredible career. And we talked about certainly one of my favorites of his, and I think of his too, Bon Cop, Bad Cop, and his love for the turtleneck. So you're going to want to find out more about that and listen in. A couple of my favorites: Last Night, The Sweet Hereafter, Beans by Tracy Deer. How about Manufacturing Consent, or Crash, and David Cronenberg's latest, The Shrouds, Sandees, Stories We Tell by Sarah Polley. Away from her, Sarah Polley. I mean, there's so many great Canadian films out there. So do a deep dive into your history. And even if you're not Canadian and listening in, check it out. canfilmday.ca. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being along for the ride. My name's David Peck. You're listening to Face to Face. Make sure you share this with family and friends. Sign up, subscribe wherever the heck you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to Face. Share it with family and friends. And thank you once again for your time. You're listening to Face. My name is David Peck.